Hey, I'm back with my beautiful Amy.
Oh, hello, beautiful Karen.
Oh, hello, my darling. Well, today we're going to look at Richard III. And
Yes.
so basically we've done Edward the Fourth, we've done Henry the Sixth is first, then Edward the Fourth. And in fact, I wondered what it was. Edward the Fourth was his brother.
Oh, okay.
So all of his brothers became king.
Oh,
There was another.
well.
Oh no, sorry. Two of the brothers became king, and Edward's son became king.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I thought that was interesting. But anyway,
Yes.
they are descendants of the Plantagenets, but actually House of York.
Oh,
It's
right.
very confusing. I mean, yeah. Anyway, let's move on. So basically, I looked at Richard III. So it said he was the last king of the House of York, which is true because then it went to Tudors. So Henry VII and Henry VIII are Tudors. Elizabeth I is a Tudor. And the last of the Plantagenet dynasty, although they were the House of York, I've just said that. It's crazy, isn't it? Why put that in there? He was the House of York, but he was a descendant from the Plantagenet dynasty. His
Right.
defeat and death at the Battle of Bosworth, which is all to do with the War of the Roses, which at some point me and Amy might attend to do, but it's so confusing, isn't it, Amy, the War of the Roses?
Yes, Karen.
I actually think that's when they did it, to be honest. I think that's when they did what they had to do for this realm.
Yeah, I know. I agree.
Well, they did something then. I just do, because the War of the Roses is so confusing. It's got to be done then. And
Right.
don't forget, we're told that they were fighting with dragons, the red ones and the right ones. But what we've realised is it wasn't dragons. They're griffins, and griffins is part of Tartaria.
That's right.
Mm. So just to get even more confusing. So
Right,
confusing, Amy.
exactly.
Just So the last decisive battle of the War of the Roses marked the end of the Middle Ages in England. Did you hear that? Marked the end of the Middle Ages. So they go, right, we finished the war now. That's the end of the Middle Ages.
Right. That's
What does that
right.
mean?
Yeah, I know.
I'll tell you what, we're going to stop this just a minute, just for 1 minute. You know me, Amy, I had to go and look up what the Middle Ages means. Listen to this. The period of European history from the fall of the Roman Empire in the west to the fall of Constantinople, or narrowly from 1000 to 1453.
Yes.
So what is the best definition of the Middle Ages? Have a look. Cultural definitions for Middle Ages. The period of history, European history, between ancient and modern times. Really? The Middle Ages began with the fall of the Roman in the 5th century and ended with the Renaissance in the early ages. Well, it took a long time to fall then, didn't it?
Yes.
I mean, we're talking of the 1400s. Are
Right.
even sometimes called the Dark Ages. Yeah. Because something else happened then. I don't know what that was. Well, it's the first time they did something, I think.
Right.
Right, what's the meaning of the Middle Ages? The period in European history, from the collapse of the Roman civilization in the 5th century to the period of Renaissance, I think we already asked this one actually, variably interpreted as the beginning in the 13th, 14th and 15th centuries, depending on the region of Europe and other factors. And that was English, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Not. Why is it called the Middle Ages? We just did that one. We'll look again though, because the Middle Ages is called because it's the time between the Imperial Rome and the beginning of the early modern Europe. The Dark Ages are also given this name because Europe was in disarray in comparison to the orderlessness of classical antiquity, and life was short and poor. Oh.
Yeah.
That was exciting then. Short and poor. Sounds like today, doesn't it? What's the characteristics of the Middle Ages? Features such as migration of people, invasion, population, distribution, and deurbanization characterize this period. Deurbanization. So obviously something else has happened and they're getting rid of something else. The medieval ages and
Right.
3 periods, which include the antiquity, the medieval periods, and the modern period, all of which exhibited different characteristics. It's not English again. It is English, but it's not making sense. So,
Right.
why is the Middle Ages so important? Let's have a look. The Middle Ages are very important because Europe was a fairly grim place. Well, it sounds even more grim after what that happened with the Middle Ages.
Yes.
Then, anyway, at the beginning of the it's more grim than at the beginning of the Middle Ages. The 5th century, roughly considered to make the start of the Middle Ages. The 5th century, and saw the breakdown of the Roman Empire. The Middle Ages were a big part of today. But that went on for 10,000 years.
Well.
I don't see how they can link it to that, because if it's the 5th century to the 4th, that's 900 and something years.
Right. Yes.
Let's have a look. How was the life in the Middle Ages? The majority of the people living in the Middle Ages lived in the country and worked as farmers. Right. Usually there was a local lord who lived in a large house called a manor or a castle. The peasants were called the lord's villeins, yeah, which was like a servant. The peasants worked hard all year round. Well, that sounds the same as when we went to America. So basically, what they did to the Americans, they did to us first. You know, I said the people went there and then they took them as slaves and took their children. They had to have done the same here.
Exactly. It sounds that way, yes.
It sounds just the same. Like, the more I'm reading, the more I realise how, like, oh, they're terrible people for doing it, but ours doesn't get talked about like that.
Right, that's right.
You know, but it's the same thing. It says the majority of the people living during the Middle Ages lived in the country and worked as farmers, so slaves basically. Usually there was a local lord who lived in a large house and manor and a castle, and the peasants were called the lord's villeins, which was like a servant. Same thing as in America. So in America, when we went there, you got your land, you got your house, you had a life. You couldn't go to the balls and all those kind of things, but you were still a second-class citizen, and you were given your house and lands. It sounds the same.
Yes, it does. That's a great point.
Gee, anyway, what's the different ages in history? Let's have a look then. Right, the 3-age system in the it's periodization. That's it, of history into 3 time periods. For example, there's the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, although it refers to other tripartite divisions of historic time periods. Didn't put the Middle Ages in there, did they? Because that came afterwards.
Right.
What ended the Middle Ages? Have a look. There was many reasons for the downfall of the Middle Ages, but the most crucial ones were the decline of the feudal system and I had to think how to say that word, guys. Declination of the church's power over the nation states. The money system in turn caused the birth of the middle class, which didn't fit anywhere in the feudal system. Right. So it was called the Dark Ages. Who ruled in the Dark Ages? Who ruled during the Dark Ages? Migration period, also called the Dark Ages or Middle Ages. Well, I thought they said that the Middle Ages, yeah. The early medieval period of Western European history, specifically the time 486 to 800, when there was no Roman or Holy Roman Empire in the West. Yeah, there you go then. That's what it's about, isn't it? That's why America, they say, is Egypt and all that. That's because they were run by the Romans.
Right.
Anyway, was no Roman or Holy Roman Empire in the West, or more generally the period between 500 to 1000, which was marked by frequent warfare, and it carries on, but we're not going on. But I thought they said the Middle Ages went on to 16 something. But anyway, how long was the Middle Ages? In the history of Europe, the Middle Ages, or medieval period, lasted from the 5th to the 15th century. There you go, 10,000 years. It began with the fall of Western Roman Empire and merged into the Renaissance of the Age of Discovery. Really? They were fighting all the time.
Yes.
Oh, let's see. It says, why is the medieval period called the Dark Ages? Some scholars perceive Europe as having been plunged into darkness when the Roman Empire fell in 500 AD. But we don't know if that history's correct, do we? That's their history. That's his story again. But the Middle Ages are often said to be dark because of a supposed lack of scientific and cultural advancement during this time. Feudalism and the dormant political system. Well, maybe we got flooded.
Right. That's a good point. Could have been that.
Do you know the facts about the Middle Ages? Let's have a look. They weren't all knights or serfs or clergy. People had the vote. The church didn't conduct witch hunts. They had a renaissance and inverted experimental science. They travelled and traded over very long distances. They had some great folk costumes. Well, it says there, the church didn't conduct witch hunts, so that's obviously all made up then.
Yeah, that's right.
Because I bet you in those days I'd have been dunked as a witch.
Oh, me too.
Isn't that horrible? If you come above the water, you're a witch, and if you sink, you're not. Oh dear, she's died. She wasn't a witch, but she's dead.
Oh, that's awful. I know.
It's horrible, isn't it?
Yes.
Right, let's have a look. It says, what events happened in the Middle Ages? Ooh. The 50, it's got 50, but we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We've got 10 showing, and I'm not going to it because it takes me off somewhere else and we're on it here. But
Yeah.
the 50 most important events of the Middle Ages. 525, Anno Domini calendar invented. 563, St. Columbanus found Iona. 590, Gregory the Great becomes Pope. 618, Tang Dynasty begins. 622, Hegia, whatever that is. 651, Islamic conquest of Persia. Wow, there you go. 691, Buddhism becomes state religion of China. 793, Vikings raid Lindisfarne. Okay, who was the most famous in the Middle Ages? I know that we're going William III, but this is all with him. So the most famous people in the medieval times is King Arthur, the 5th to the 6th century. Charlemagne, 743 to 814. I don't really know what that is. Leif Erikson, 970 to 1020. William the Conqueror, 1028 to 1087. An added note by a web advisor, whatever that is. Eleanor of Aquitaine, 1122 to 1204. Richard the Lionheart, and that's 1157 to 1195. And then William Wallace died 1305. Right, and what it is people don't realise, but the more you press these, the more of them appear. When did the Dark Ages, what did peasants do for fun? We'll have to look at this. For fun during the Middle Ages, peasants danced, wrestled, bet on cockfighting and beer baiting, and played an early version of football. On Sundays, pheasants were allowed to rest and go... Oh, peasants, sorry, pheasants. Peasants were allowed to rest and go to church. Some pious peasants undertook pilgrimage to gain God's favour. Right, what did the girl peasants do? Let's have a look. Women had many domestic responsibilities, caring for the children, preparing food and tending livestock. And during the busiest time of the year, such as harvest, women often joined their husbands in the fields with the crops. What did the what era do we live in? Let's have a look. What era do we live in?
Yeah.
What do you think that era we're living in now is called?
Excuse me, it should be called the Dark Ages.
Yeah, it is the Dark Ages. It's like we've gone back hundreds of years. It's called Holocene era. Holocene. I've never heard that before, have you?
Either.
See, on this channel you find out things all the time, but it's their history. But it says the present year 2020 can be transformed into the Holocene year by adding the digit 1 before it, making it 12020 HE. Years BCE are converted by subtracting the BC and the BCE year number from 10,000, beginning of the Magellan age, the current and the latest of 3 stages in the Holocene era. Oh my, once I'm going to have to quickly look up that. I just want to look. It says it's the name given to the last 11,700 years of Earth's life. History. The time since the end of the last major glacial epoch, or the Ice Age. Since then, there have been small-scale climate shifts, notably the Little Ice Age between about 12 and 17 AD. Well, that's why it was miserable then. It was so cold.
Exactly, yes.
But in general, the Holocene has been... When did the Holocene end? Well, it can't have done because we're in it. It began approximately 11,650 calendar years before present, after the last glacial period. Well, we're not going to look up any more. We found out a little bit about that. I've never heard of that before.
Me neither.
Right, 1 second. It says, how did the plague... Well, they used to call them plagues, whereas now they call them viruses.
Yes.
Same thing's happening now, because this is going to change us completely. The most popular theory of how the plague ended is through the implementation of quarantines. Oh my God, Amy!
Yes, and I'm reading a book that's called The Great Reset by Klaus Schwab of World Economics. And anyway, he refers to this, the plague, and said what a great way to bring in a new world when I was reading his book.
Is that what they're doing? That's what they're doing to us now?
Yes, and he even admits it in his book from the World Economic Forum. It's called a certain name, and then it says the Great Reset. It says, in other words, it's called Lyris, the Great Reset. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Variation of that. Lyris, the Great Reset. And he refers to, when I was reading it, he refers to the plague and how that was able to bring in a whole new system. And what better way to do it, because now we have a plague, he said, basically, so we can bring all this new stuff in. So yes.
The uninfected would typically remain in their homes. Oh my God, and only leave when it was necessary. While those who could afford to do so would leave more densely populated areas and live in greater isolation.
Well,
it's amazing how history repeats itself, isn't it?
Oh, yes, it certainly is.
When have you ever heard that before?
I really haven't, and like I said, I read that book, a little bit of it, and they were talking about it, but I never heard about, but they might have mentioned about having a quarantine in there. But yeah, I never heard this about the plague, ever.
There are other questions about it, but we're going to stop here because we're going to go back to William now. But that's the era that he's in, okay, the Middle Ages. I just wanted to read up about it.
Yeah,
but it's the same as now. They were in quarantine.
Yes, same as now.
Oh, right.
Hey. Yeah,
so we're back here with Richard. So I'm just going to read this. It said he was the last king of the House of York and was one of the Plantagenets. I might have actually done this, but we'll just read it again because I've got lost now. His defeat and death at the Battle of Bosworth was the last decisive battle of the War of the Roses, marked at the end of the Middle Ages in England. He is the protagonist of Richard III, one of William Shakespeare's history plays. Yeah, he got picked for that. Anyway, there's some pictures of what they say he looks like. And this is the person whose remains they found, but some of his could be probably and all goes bed with the day. They stop the semester through this, and it says, appearing on the BBC. Langley said Richard III was most certainly a great king who wanted to make life fairer and more bearable for ordinary people. When Richard died at the field of Bosworth in 1485, a new dynasty was born, and the dynasty had to legitimise itself. Oh, I wonder what that means exactly.
I know.
Anyway, going on to another one then. It says, how did he die? Richard III died in the thick of battle after losing his helmet and coming under hail of blows and vicious medieval. Numerous scans of the king's he sustains near time 9 to the sky. Oh, doesn't that sound awful?
Oh, it does. It's awful.
But we don't know if that's real.
Right.
Right, so we've done that bit there. So I put it went back a bit. So let's move it on a little bit. Right, Richard III was the King of England for two. Richard III was King of England for 2 turbulent years. That's it. He is best known for being accused of murdering his nephews to protect his throne. Right. Yes, so I'm just going to look at this quickly. King Richard III, seen here, portrayed by, it's an actor, Paul Daneman, in 1962, has often been described as a hunchback. King Richard's condition was scolios. Oh, I don't know. Amy, Scoliosis. Scoliosis. What's that? All right, here we go.
Like
where the spine curves to the side.
Yeah.
The analysis suggests only a slight effect on the appearance of his. I'm sorry, I've got to stop the dog from. She's snoring. I just got to. Right, shut her up for a minute. The analysis suggests only a slight effect on his appearance, and his movement would not have been limited. Well, that's not how they're portraying it. Like, they portray him with this as a great big hunch on his back. It says,
right.
Analysis suggests only a slight effect on his appearance, and his movement would not have been, limited. So that's crazy, isn't it?
It is.
So that's just ridiculous, isn't it, Amy?
It is, Karen. I
Right.
know.
Is the Queen related to Richard III? Well, the bones of the King in the car park were discovered under shock 520 his death, and more than 2 years. Hang on, it's got to stop it. It's moved fast. 2 years after his remains were discovered in Leicester, Richard III was a blue-eyed blonde, but he might not have been. He might have been a darker-skinned person.
Right.
And the present Queen may not be descended from John O'Gorn and Edward III, the lineage of which the Tudor claim. But they're all related. I did that the other day. That Henry VIII, Elizabeth I was related to all of them, so that doesn't make sense.
That's right.
What I'm saying is she's related to all the people on the tree, and it goes back to Edward III. Well, that doesn't say the same thing, but I suppose it never does it?
No, it never does it? Oh.
And then I've looked up, it says, who killed Richard III? Henry Tudor. Richard died at the Battle of Bosworth on the 22nd, 1485, fighting an armed, led by Henry Tudor, who became Henry VII. He was surrounded by enormous enemy forces, according to one account, after his horse got stuck in the marsh. Of the injuries found in the study, 9 were to the head, including a puncture from a sword. Ugh.
Oh.
Well, brutal deaths in those days, if it's true. But we don't know if any of this is true.
That's right. We don't know.
Amy?
Oh, I'm here.
Oh, I thought you cut off. And back to that bit now. Let's just have a. Here we go. So we've done that one. I missed that one. Right. So.
Oh, my telling us, so I muted it. That's why.
Oh, right. Okay.
I didn't realize we were recording, so I wondered, But yeah.
So it says, why was Richard III an unpopular king? He was an unpopular. His defence of the North during the rule of his brother also improved his standing among the people. Furthermore, his assumption of the throne was approved by Parliament, and the rebellion he faced was typical occurrence for a monarch at that time. I thought we didn't really have government until Queen Victoria's time, but there was a Parliament.
Right.
Right. Well, I don't know. Nothing adds up to the way that you think that you've been told it.
That's for sure.
Did Richard sleep with Elizabeth? Princess had an affair with her. Probably Elizabeth have sex with her. Anyway. And to this, they don't know. And to this day, suspected had her two younger brothers killed. I can't say the word. I can't say the word, Amy. What's USURPD? Usurp. Usurped.
Usurp, yes.
Alright, okay. Let me put this. Richard I usurped the throne after the death of his older brother. Richard III was called Richard Plantagenet to make it even more confusing because he was a House of York. So he wasn't a Plantagenet in the end, but he did come from them.
Right.
And then that explains a bit more. People can read that themselves because it's just saying names. Let's move on then. Right. It's even more confusing before we started.
No.
So he seemed to marry Lady Anne. He undertakes her wooing and at that what would appear to be last. Hang on, I've just lost the word now. I'm read everybody. Appeared to be least propitious moment for such an enterprise during the funeral procession for her father-in-law, Henry VI, whom Richard has murdered. Oh, it just gets so complicated, doesn't it? This whole part of history is so complicated. Anyway, I'm just looking through. I'm sure I'm going to pick another here. Recent genetic research by the University of Leicester now suggests that Richard III would probably have had blue eyes, blonde hair, although this would have darkened as he is. I think he was probably a lot darker. Well, there's a bit more now. Hang on. It says, what language did he speak? Under the circumstances, it seems highly unlikely that the later King Edward IV, Edward V, and Richard III would have been brought up with French as their first language. What?
Well.
What? Right, okay. English was probably spoken by kings, since at least Edward I, who learnt it from his tutors, and his father Henry III also spoke it well. What does that mean then? We didn't speak English here, we spoke French.
Yes. I never knew that.
Wow. Don't you find that amazing?
I do.
Alright, on we go then. Just uncovering more things. At the end of it, no one will know if they're coming or going. Is the Queen a Plantagenet? She's descended. Well, I've got lost now where I was. But people can just read these two. It's just more talk about. It just says it's just about. Are there any living Tudors? And the other one is, are there any Plantagenets? But we do know that there's William, and he lives in Australia, and he should be king.
Right.
He comes before all this. Anyway, let's move on. Not much we can do about that. He doesn't even want to be king anyway.
That's right. I don't blame him.
It says he was a strong warrior, managed to unhorse a jousting champion in his final fight, but he was later gone on too quick. Yeah, but he was later surrounded by men of Sir William Stanley, who was said to have beaten him so hard that his helmet entered his skull, killing him.
Oh.
So he wasn't killed at the battle then. It says Richard was a strong warrior and managed to unhorse a jousting champion in his final fight. Okay. But he was later surrounded by men of Sir William Stanley, who was said to have beaten him so hard that his helmet entered his skull, killing him.
Oh my goodness, it's awful.
Well, we don't know if any of it's true, do we? But
That's true,
we're just
right?
reading what his story says. How did Richard
Exactly.
III claim the English crown? On the 4th of March 1461, Richard's brother is proclaimed Edward IV by the Earl of Warwick, known as the Kingmaker, ousted the Lancastrian Henry VI, which we did. We've done both of those. We've done Edward IV and we've done Henry VI. Edward strengthens his claim to the throne by defeating Henry's army at the Battle of Towton on the 29th of March. Richard is made Duke of Gloucester on the 1st of November. Right. Well, anyway, I'm not sure if we look at any more. We're coming to the end now and we're going on to another bit. Oh, we do. Hang on, let's have a look at this one. What happened to Elizabeth Woodville's sons? Now, that's his sons. Anne Holland died in 1467. He then married Cecily Bonville, daughter of William Bonville and Catherine Neville, a grandniece of Cecily Neville and first cousin once removed of Edward IV. They had 7 sons and 7 daughters. Oh my God.
Wow.
Lady Jane Grey was their great-granddaughter through their son Thomas Grey, 1477-1530. They had 14 children.
My goodness.
And that was his second marriage. Why didn't any of them become king?
Right.
I think that's what I was trying to look up. I didn't find it, but I was just looking at this stuff. Anyway, let's move on. Because they didn't become king and that lot, so, you know, right.
Right.
Right, let's have a look at this one. Anne and Richard were first cousins once removed, as were George and Isabel, all descended from Ralph de Neville and Joan Beaufort. Joan was the legitimised daughter of John of Gaunt, Duke of Lancaster, and Catherine Swynford. I think that's right, Swynford, yeah. Clarence tried to prevent the marriage of his first sister to his brother. Well, we're just getting more confusing, aren't we? It's just getting more...
Well, it is confusing.
Confusing, isn't it, Amy?
Oh, it is here, and yes.
Anyway, so the more you put in, you tap this, the more... So in the end, I have... Because there's too much else to do. We've been going for 33 minutes and we've still got most of the video. Anyway, these are some pictures I saw. Obviously, it's talking about, what is it? Oh, that's Charles the First. I just saw that one and stuck it in. It's nothing to do with Richard III, but I suddenly come across pictures. But that word, oh yeah, that's right. That's why I put it in there. Because everybody who was a kind of said that. So obviously, I went to look it up in the dictionary. And the first few, I was telling you about it, Amy. The first few talk about darker skinned people, but GRO, they were all called that.
Yes.
So down here in this America, it's anybody who's that word, whether it's French, German, it doesn't matter. Anyway, I just wanted to look it up, and we've done that. Anyway, then Mary Queen of Scots. Oh, so hang on a second, I've got to go back. There it is. Mary Queen of Scots, fact check. Was Queen Elizabeth Ambassador black? They're just appearing everywhere, aren't they? It's like there's more of that. What it is they've got it down as just English people, but actually we were completely... There's been loads of mixed people in our royalty.
Yes.
It's just incredible. What a lie. What an absolute lie. Imagine me trying to tell this to my parents.
Oh, I know.
They're never going to believe me. Or they'll go, well, you can believe what you like. That's what they'll say.
Yes.
Anyway, and then this Richard III, England legend. But it's a book. Anyway, interested, you can find that book. And obviously, Shakespeare was the other part with Richard III. And King James after first. There's Richard III, who we're talking about. There's Edward IV, we've done him, and Henry VI is up here. There's Richard III. You've got Henry VII. And then you've got Henry VIII. And then you've got Elizabeth I. So that's how it went. 1, 2, 3, 4. Anyway, let's move on. It goes James VI, or the first, was King of Scotland, and James VI as James VI from the 24th of July 1567, and King of England and Ireland as James I from the union of the Scottish and the English crowns on the 24th of March 1603, so that's just after Elizabeth, until his death in 1625. The kingdoms of Scotland and England were individual sovereign states and had their own parliaments. There you go.
Yes.
Never heard that before either, but anyway, let's move on.
Neither.
Sorry, my recorder's now playing up. Yeah, wow. Anyway, because James I was a very dark-skinned person, and that's Henry Lord de Darnley. He was another coloured person here, and there's an etching of him. It's amazing where these come from.
I know.
But so that's another one. We were living with each other, all in peace.
Right. Yes.
There's a little bit about him because I went and looked him up a little bit. I think he's more like James the first time. Not doing very well today. It's so confusing with their names.
It is.
All the Jameses and Henrys and everything else. Oh, God.
Yes.
Anyway, so that's him. First Duke of Albany, 1545. So he's around when Queen Elizabeth is coming to the end of her. Well, anyway, there's another one. There's James Stewart, Earl of Morgan. See, a darker person, to be honest. There isn't. Obviously, in most pictures he's defined as white, but in the black and white ones, and about 4 of the 6 pictures he's dark. Well, some of the others he is as well, but it's a bit hard to know what's the truth, isn't it? But I just think that we were all living together bit sounds right to me.
Me too.
And then, basically, Henry VI, Richard of York is Richard III. You've got the Mad King Henry VI. There's the Battle of Blore, Battle of Ludford, Battle of Wakefield, Battle of Towton, and so forth. That was just a bit of history about... Because that's all War of the Roses. Well, I think they're battling something else there, to be honest.
Right.
That's what I think, with those griffins.
Yes.
Oh, had to subscribe to something, but I didn't. Anyway, so there's a little bit of writing if you want to read it. It might be a bit quick for everybody. I'm just scooting through it. Talks a little bit about the battles and that. But anybody who does the War of the Roses, I have to give a...
I know.
Because it is though, isn't it, Amy? It's so confusing.
Oh, it is here, and it really is so complicated and confusing.
And when I listened to those little videos, I think I sent you 3 or 4, didn't I? They all had different people. It was all different. In each video said something different.
Exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, so who won the War of the Roses? Let's have a look at this one. The clash ended in a decisive victory, and Richard III was killed during the fighting by a vicious blow to his head. Tudor was immediately crowned Henry VII, launching a new Tudor dynasty that flourished until the early 1700s. And I think that's what stopped the War of the Roses, is when the king was killed.
Yes.
And that's the one that Henry was trying to stop happen. Henry VI. Remember, they put him as weak.
Yes.
But I don't
Right.
think he was. I think he was a good man who didn't want, all that time fighting.
That's right.
That's what I think, anyway.
Right.
But that's if we don't know if they're real or not, do we? Right, there we go.
We
Oh,
don't.
I've got to do it again, I think. I've got to put it. I'm just looking up a little bit of information again, because obviously it's good to refresh people's mind. There's Henry VI. And it says a little bit there. Then you've got Edward IV came to the throne next. And there's a little bit of information there. Then came Richard III. At least I know I'm learning his story now.
Right.
There's a little bit of information of him. Then after that came Henry VII. He was the next king. And after that was King Henry VIII. And I think he's pretty momentous when he took the Catholic Church out and made a new religion.
Yes.
That's what I think.
Yes, me too.
And then after him was Elizabeth I. So everybody can read that little bit of information about her. I think it's quite incredible. And then came James I, or James VI of Scotland.
Right.
And then after that came Charles I. 1623, in 1640. Anyway, we've gone off that now. We're looking at other stuff. It says he was the third most unpopular king. He had evil character. He revealed in his I think it's because he killed his nephew, post other things.
Oh.
And his ultimate failure at Bosworth when his subjects refused to fight for him. Oh dear, the soldiers didn't want to. Let's have a look at that. The soldiers didn't want to fight for him. That's not good, is it? There's my daughter. Hello, Ellie. My daughter's just got home. Anyway, that's the doors going. Anyway, the Battle of the Somme. The Battle of the Somme was one of the largest battles of World War One. Oh, well, we don't want that. That's not our history.
Right.
Oh, yeah, that's what I looked up. What was the bloodiest battle? And they said it was World War One, and it was the Battle of the Somme. Somme. It was the bloodiest in all human history. Oh. Sounds horrible, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Obviously fighting over Tartaria and the Queen and all that, weren't they, really? But I turned the recorder off. Basically, I looked up what was the bloodiest battle in human history, and it said the Battle of Somme, and this was the First World War. So you can read that. Yeah, that's not good then, is it? Anyway, let's move on. Where am I going? So basically about the fact that he has a bent spine, really. But it was a book taken into Hastings. A trusted advisor to the King Edward IV was executed on charges of treason in 1483. Richard III officially became the country's new king. So he went, murder, 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 and I'm the king now.
Oh, yes.
On the 4th of March, 1461, Richard's brother proclaimed Edward IV as the Earl of Warwick, ousting the Lancastrian Henry VI. Edward's strength to his claim to the throne by defeating Henry's army in the Battle of Taunton on the 29th of March. Richard is made Duke of Gloucester on the 1st, but he became king, Richard III. So that's I thought it wasn't recording. It is recording. What the? No, I've put it back now. What do you reckon about him being a hunchback then? I think that was much of a problem to him, although, he's a hunchback, but it doesn't seem to have been a problem to him. But how do we know? We weren't around in his time.
That's right. I don't think he was probably really a hunchback. I think he might have just had that scoliosis that you were reading about.
He definitely had something on his spine, because they said, but anyway, How did Richard become the third king? Let's have a look. I read that out. I'm just going to read it again in case I didn't. Well, basically, it comes from. So it starts off with Edward the Fourth, and was executed on charges of treason. Oh, I don't know. Just everybody read that. I'm sorry, I'm too tired. It doesn't make much sense actually. How did Richard the Third become king? Anyway, I think we actually did that in one of the other ones.
Yeah.
So I'm just moving it on. People can read that.
Yes.
Like I say, every time you press one of those, you get more and more and more of them.
Right.
And we've already talked about that as well, which I'll just let people read that one. Just his claim to the throne. We've got just about a minute and a half to go, Amy. So,
okay.
Amy does this all in the dark. She's pretty good, aren't you, Amy?
Oh, well, I just listened to you reading it, so you're doing good explaining it.
Yeah, I might actually, I don't know, we've got like a minute to go on the recording. I might stop in a minute because it's like, I just wanted to find out about this War of the Roses more than anything, but I think we have to do that as a separate video because that is just going to be mind-bending. I think because the wars go backwards and forwards through England, and it's quite a confusing. Yeah. The whole thing's confusing. Anyway, we hope that people have learnt a few more things, even learnt a bit more about English history. We don't know how much of it's correct, or if any of it's correct, but it seems our history is not what they've told us at all.
Exactly.
No. Anyway, Amy, I love you lots. Thank you for helping me do this video.
You too. You're welcome. Thank you.
Oh, it says, who caused the War of the Roses? We're just going to do that one.
Okay.
There you go. Henry VI of England caused it, but he didn't. You know he didn't. He didn't want the war.
That's right.
That's mean to blame him for the War of the Roses, isn't it?
It really is.
How when you see that a man had gone that much effort to have peace that they blamed him for the war?
I know, it's ridiculous.
It always is ridiculous, isn't it? But anyway, thank you so much, Amy.
You're welcome, Karen.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.